Okay, tonight we got Cameron. We got a barber from out of Florida. There's now a school owner. He has his own barber school, but he hadn't always had their school and he hadn't always been a barber. One thing I can tell you, he had one of the most successful barbershops doing six figures. Now, I don't know how he did that because that's like uncommon in today's world with COVID and everything else. But I'm not going to talk a lot. Cameron, welcome. We were at the ClickFunnels event. He's on that. So we had a good time down in Florida. I finally got to meet him face to face and touch him and everything. You know, we got this social media and Instagram, and a lot of y'all we meet online and we feel like we brothers and sisters already. I felt like I already knew him because I had talked to him so much online. So Cameron, can you introduce yourself? And then we want to start basically from your childhood and kind of take us to the journey to where you're at now.
Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Cameron. I am a barber school owner, barbershop owner, and I still do cut hair, but only 2 days a week. I mainly do that because I really enjoy it. It would be wiser for me to step away from the chair and run my businesses, but I really like cutting hair. So now that's just kind of what I do as a passion. Um, so starting from childhood, well, first I want to talk about how I found Chin. So I found Chin online, and one of the things that really attracted me to Chin was his story about how he was raised and how he experienced going to prison and the trouble he did, and then what he was able to build once he got out. Because I had a really rough upbringing. I was raised in a very small town. My parents, they did the best they could, but they weren't the best parents. We could just say that. I grew up in Northern California where the marijuana industry was kind of just something that everyone did. So growing pot, even though it was legal when I was older, it was still really sketch and really dangerous. But my dad brought me into that industry when I was a teenager. So I started doing that. And then I got in some trouble and I was just going down a really dark path. And so when I heard Chin's story about how he had made some mistakes and done some wild things when he was young, it really attracted me to him because he gave me a lot of motivation and inspiration that doesn't really matter. You know, our past is we just learn a lot of lessons, and we can use that to grow. So after my stint with getting in a little bit of trouble and making bad decisions, I went to work for a lumber company. I was working for a company that, like a logging company, and which is really weird that now I'm a barber, but I suffered a back injury at the job, and which at the time it was really awful because that job, I really hated the job, but I made really good money and I was getting paid full benefits. I had paid vacation every year, starting 2 weeks off paid when my first year. So growing up, that was kind of like the best job in the area you could get, unless you were like a doctor or a lawyer or worked in the medical field. I was doing the next best thing. And I was following in my father's footsteps, which he was miserable. So I don't know why I would think that was the thing to do. I was kind of like, that's how I was raised, and that's was the expectation of me. And I didn't really expect any more of myself because that's all I knew, and that's all I was taught. I was never taught that I could do these greater things. But after I suffered my back injury, I herniated discs in my upper back in between my shoulder blades, and for like 4 months I could barely use my arms. So, in being a man, it's really difficult to not be able to do anything for yourself. I couldn't cook. I've had just started dating, who's now my wife, but we were driving down the road. We blew out a tire, and I couldn't even change the tire. So like that was really embarrassing because we had just started dating, and like, what kind of man, like, you really want to ring me up if I can't even change your tire? So my back started getting better, but I had to find a new career. I could not go back into labor work because my back, and I was young, so I refused surgery because the doctors told me that the odds are is that if I get surgery now, I'm going to have to continue to get them. So I was just banking on my body doing its thing and hopefully recovering, which I did. But my wife at the time, she worked for Supercuts, and she was a cosmetologist. And she told me, you should go to school to be a barber. I was like, a barber? I've never even been to a barber shop. I grew up in the woods, like rednecks. We didn't go to barbers. We had long hair, beards, everybody chewed. Like, so that was really weird. There was only one barber in like the area, and he was like 85 years old, and you went to him and you got the one cut. It was like a flat top. It's like all he could do. And so it was really odd to me, but she was making good money. It wasn't labor work. So I started watching YouTube videos. And as I started watching YouTube videos, I started really getting into it. And I started cutting like friends and family. And then there were no barber schools in our area. Another reason I had never been to a barber shop, my mom was a cosmetologist when I was really little, but she quit working at a salon to be a stay-at-home mom when I was like 12 years old. So it kind of runs in the family. But so she talked me into going to barber school. We had to move 12 hours away. We moved from Northern California to Southern California. We got to San Diego. I started going to school in California. It was my school. I believe it was 1,200 hours that I had to go to school. I had to go to school from 8 in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I had to work all afternoon. And the school was 13 months long in a really expensive city. So it was really a struggle to get through school because I didn't have any financial support from anybody except for my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And I was too proud to have her put me through school. So I was working like really awful jobs. I was Ubering all the time, and I really hated driving drunk people around, but it paid the bills. And then I was even hosting at Buffalo Wild Wings because when I went through school, it was at a time when it was really difficult to get jobs. No one was hiring. The economy wasn't very good. So I was working terrible jobs to get through school. And then I got a job cutting illegally at a barbershop without a license. And it was a really ghetto barbershop. I really learned what not to do in that shop and what kind of owner not to be, what kind of barber not to be. So I learned a lot of lessons there, and I didn't make very much money. I also didn't know what I was doing, and no one would help me. But after I graduated school, I worked for 6 months in my first barbershop. And when me and my wife started dating, she told me when we first started dating, no matter what, we're moving to Florida. I'm going with or without you. And I was like, there's no way I'll convince her to stay in California. We're going to stay in San Diego. No one wants to leave San Diego. Well, 6 months after school, she dropped that ultimatum on me. All right, I'm going to Florida. I told you, you coming with me? Yes, guess I'm going with you. I'd never even been to Florida. So I winged it. Had never been to Florida. Honestly thought I was going to hate it, but she told me the fishing was good. So I was like, all right, I do like fishing, so I could live with that. We got to Florida. I ended up really loving it. We started working for a barbershop here in Florida. I started working there. There was only one other barber there. I was really busy. That barber got fired. And my wife, the shop she was at, she was kind of slow. So I talked her into coming over to work with me. We both got really busy. There were two owners of the shop. They both had separate families, but they got caught having an affair about 6 months into us working there. And we had a 2-day notice that they were shutting the shop down. So we had just got a house. We just got a boat, and we just lost our jobs, like all within like a month. And financial irresponsibility by going for the boat and the house all in 1 month. But we learn, right, from our bad judgments. And so they told us, yeah, you got 2 days. We're shutting down the shop. And then I was a rookie. I still hadn't even been barbering for a year. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was doing mainly walk-ins, and then we were doing the old school booking, like the actual book, writing it hand by hand, which is terrible. I don't know why we were doing that. And we also weren't getting anyone's emails and phone numbers. And now I really understand the power of building that list. And this was the biggest lesson I learned about building that list, because I had 2 days worth of clients that I could warn that I'm going to be leaving the shop, which was a small fraction of the clientele I had worked really hard to build. So after we closed, there were no barbershops in our area that we liked. No one really ran a business that we wanted to work for. So we decided to open up our own barbershop, which my wife really gambled on me because I had 8-9 months experience of barbering and 0 business experience. She was a manager for like 5 years, so she had some leadership experience. And so we just sent it. We just prayed about it. We felt like it was the right thing to do. We went for it, and we opened our shop in 2 weeks. We got a small loan. We And one part I forgot, when they shut the shop down, they owed us like 3 or 4 grand. So we were expecting to get that money still. Well, they didn't give it to us. They wouldn't pay us. They said they didn't have it anymore. So what I did was, when they closed, I took everything from inside their shop and I put it in my, I was like, you're gonna I guess I'm buying this stuff. Like, I'm getting something from you. So I realistically like ended up with a lot more stuff than what I could have bought with the money they owed me. Like, it's kind of funny, but I have a big buffalo head in our barber shop now, and a kudu, which is like an African, an animal from Africa. And to buy each of those would run you like 4 or 5 grand a piece. And I just absorbed those because they didn't pay me, and a bunch more stuff. So it worked out because everyone loves those in the barber shop, and it makes my shop look a lot nicer. But so I took all the stuff, we put it all in a new building, like 4 doors down, there was an empty space. We got a building that was way too expensive in rent because we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to properly calculate how much money we needed to make per square foot, and all those things that, as you're a business owner, you learn. And so we got a building that was too big, really expensive, in the nicest plaza in town, and had no money because we just spent it all on opening. And then we were running that shop. We were working it by ourselves for 6 months, just grinding every day as hard as we could, 10-hour days, paying those bills, plus trying to make enough to pay home. Luckily, a lot of our people found us, and we were able to build that clientele back really fast. And so we started building a team, which was another unforeseen hurdle, that there were no barbers in our area. And so that was something we didn't even think we were going to have a problem with hiring. Now we're having a really tough time bringing on barbers. And fortunately, Jeremy Archer, I think he's watching right now. He's my brother-in-law. He decided he wanted to go to barber school, so he moved here from Vegas, and he was going to a barber school in Pensacola. And his experience probably wasn't that good. I don't think he got a very good education. I think he would agree with that. But anyways, he got through barber school, and he was one of the first guys we hired, and he's been awesome. We're training him to be our manager now, but for a long time we couldn't get people. So we had 6 chairs in there, and 3 of them were constantly empty. And then when we would hire people, they would just be awful employees, and we would put up with things that we didn't want to put up with, and we knew we shouldn't because we needed them, and we were just desperate. And while we were going through all that, we were really focusing on how to make our barbershop as profitable as possible. How can we create systems that would bring us as much money as possible? And how could we build our team so that they're making as much money as possible? And one thing that I did learn is, like, even when things are really bad, you just have to push forward as hard as you can, because that's when we experience the most growth. If we can learn to grow when things are rough, when things are good, you're going to grow exponentially more. So while we were struggling, we were still trying really hard to figure out how to make our shop profitable. And we started taking things from all these different industries. So we started taking things from like the salon industry and the aesthetics industry and how they were running their businesses. And we just started plugging them into our barbershop and operating. And like, I started using marketing strategies that I learned from real estate agents and people in real estate that I was cutting their hair. So I was just taking all these random things from different industries and trying to plug them in to make them work in the barbershop. Because I also didn't realize when we opened it how difficult it was to make a profitable barbershop. But so we couldn't hire, and that's when we were like, all right, we need to open a school. If we can't find barbers, we need to make barbers. So we had no idea how to do that. We started doing some research. We found out how difficult the process was. And then I stumbled across Chin on YouTube, I think is when I first found you. I think it was one of your YouTube videos about how to open a school. And then I watched all those, and I think it was like the same day I called you and talked to you. And I remember I was in a Walgreens parking lot, like, I need to get this done. I'm tired of struggling. And then so we linked up with Chin, and then we started working on the school. I think I only talked to Chin 1 or 2 times before we started getting coaching from him. Is there anything specific, Chin, that you want to talk about the school?
No, you can kind of tell them about that process. We talked and then you joined and you started kind of walk them through that a little bit. Now I got a few questions. So
Okay.
they tell you all that they're shutting down and you get a 2-day notice,
Yeah.
right? So did you and your wife get a U-Haul and come back that night or the next night? How did that go?
Oh shoot, no, we weren't going to spend money on a U-Haul. We literally walked it down the street, all of it.
Oh,
We had
okay.
our we had our SUV, like the back stuffed full, and we would drive it like a few hundred yards down the road and just empty it and go back and like make just make as many trips as necessary.
Now, how did you make that barbershop so profitable? Can you tell us some of the things that you did?
Secret. No, I'm
Okay.
just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah. So to be honest, the main thing we did was build a system that allows our barbers to become very successful, and we also run a commission only barbershop. Um, I don't really understand why a barber, in my experience and my belief, that it's just not wise business wise to run a booth rent barbershop because you're limiting the amount of money you can make. And when you do that, it's really hard to want to invest into your people because we started as a booth rent shop first and it just didn't work out well at all. Um, and if you wanted to raise your booth rent at all, people would kind of freak out. So we moved to commission, and we just built systems in place that the better they do. We have a lot of systems that we've built over the years, and we've paid for a lot of coaching and people to help us who have a lot more experience. And that's one thing that I've really learned is like with you, Chin, is like paying someone who has blazed that trail before you and getting help from a coach is extremely beneficial because you're gonna move much further, much quicker without making so many mistakes. So we had one of our coaches, she was in the salon industry for like 22 years, and she helped us plug a lot of the ways that salons operate. So we have our barbers on like a sliding scale. Um, the more money they make, the better their percentage gets. So it keeps them motivated, kind of naturally without us really having to like push them too hard. And then also we really focus on building them. We train them. We send them to Orlando Premiere every year. We do a lot of things that are really beneficial for them. We pay for all their marketing. I spend a lot of time marketing. I also do that because I really enjoy it. So we really invest heavily into our team, and they benefit really heavily because they get to come to work, just cut hair, make sure the shop's clean, and they get to leave knowing that we're always have their back and making sure that their chairs stay full. And we have also created a growth system so that, and this is, if any of you guys run shops, I think that this was a really big game changer, is that we make sure that we always are trying to provide more opportunity for our team to expand and to grow and to make more money. Because if people hit a brick wall, for only, especially people that are ambitious, they're only going to do that for a limited amount of time before they want to move on and do something for themselves. So it's really important to us that we continue to provide as much opportunity for our team so that they can grow and become who they want to be. Not everyone wants to become like managers or shop owners, but if that is an ambition of theirs, we're going to work with them to work together so that we can help provide and help that dream come true. And that's been a real game changer, um, with helping our barbershop be so successful.
Now, when you were watching the YouTubes, what made you join the program? Because you didn't
I
talk
didn't,
a long time.
oh, we didn't talk on the phone for very long? No, not at
No.
all. Um, because I knew that in the long run, paying for coaching and having the process move faster would benefit me. So short term cost up front for long term return. And just from your YouTubes and talking to you and looking at your social medias, I could tell immediately that you knew far more about doing this than I did. And I learned with my barbershop by doing it all by myself, having no experience, that it was years of making the wrong decisions and grinding and struggling and learning the hard way. And I didn't want to do that again with the school. I'd already done that once.
Now what was your wife thinking? Because I remember her too.
All right, this is pretty funny. So so she was totally down to open a school, but I'm sometimes overly ambitious. People tell me I just like go for things when I get something in my head. So she was cool with opening the school, and we talked to you, and we talked about coaching, and then I saw, and this is the honest truth, I saw one of our competitors followed you on Facebook, and I was like, oh heck no, I gotta beat him. I'm opening a school before that guy. Just because he followed you planted that seed in my heart that was just like, I can't let him open a school before me. Because I didn't want that competition here. I wanted to be the first one to open a school, be solidified in the area. And I have enough faith in my abilities that I know that if anyone opens a school here, that they won't be able to compete with me.
Can you take us on the journey of you opening the school, from getting the lease to putting everything in there, the
Oh
chair,
yeah,
floors?
absolutely.
Take us on that journey.
Okay, really quick though, I don't want to leave this out because I think it's really funny, and if my wife's watching, she kind of hates me for it. But so when I realized that, it like gave me a real sense of urgency. I don't think I ever told her that, so she might have just found that out. But gave me a real sense of urgency, and the reason why my wife was not so happy is because she was like 8 months pregnant. So we're about to have a baby. We just bought a house. So our baby's due in like three weeks. We're moving into the house, and I sent in an application to open a school. So she was really upset with me because she knew how much work that I was taking on. But I just kept trying to assure her, like, I promise you it's going to pay off and you won't regret it. Now she doesn't regret it because everything's good. But for like 6 to 8 months, she was really bitter.
Mhm.
And rightfully so, I could have waited. I could have waited till after Cruz was born, and we were first time parents, have no idea what we're doing, but just went for it. And then so we submitted the application. Well, first we got the coaching from you, we got your program. So I spent a lot of time going through that and making sure that we were doing the application properly. So we filled out all the paperwork, we sent it in. Um, it took a few weeks to get it back. And unfortunately, our process with the state board, I think, was probably worse than most people's because it was right at the tail end of everything kind of shifting from everyone working at home from COVID. And the state was just really a mess. And I don't know if you guys have struggled with your states with that, but Florida, the state board here, or the Florida Department of Education, they are really unorganized. So every time we would get like a caseworker, they would start helping us. Our first one, he worked with us with the longest, and he was not very good at his job. You can tell he didn't want to do it. And I would submit the application, and so I submitted the course catalog, all those things. And he would send me back an email like, fix these things. So, and it'd be like a week or two later. So I'd go and I'd fix those things and I'd send it back. And he'd send me another email, fix these things. And it would only be like 2 or 3 things, small things. And then I'd send it back and it'd be like another week. And he'd send me 2 or 3 little things. And I'd be like, dude, can you please just go through it all, make me one big list so I can fix all these things and then send it back to you, and it would save us both time. No, he wouldn't do that. And so then he quit. I call one day and they're like, yeah, Jalen quit. And I'm like, what do you mean he quit? They're like, yeah, he quit, and we're understaffed and everyone's overworked. So it might be a while before anyone gets to your stuff. I'm like, no, that's not acceptable. I have a building and bills. And so they gave me someone else. This guy ended up being really cool. 2 weeks later, he quit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like seriously. And then we get another woman. She's just really grumpy. And then she quit. So we had 3 people quit. And every time someone quit, it would set us back because they would have to go through everything again. They didn't trust the people's work before them. So they would re-go through everything. They would tell me more things I had to do. They were telling me that I had to do things differently. I'm like, so my fourth person is telling me this doesn't work, but this is what Jalen told me to do. So it really felt like it was kind of at their discretion. It wasn't really like there's a set way of doing things. It was like whoever you're working with kind of decides what's necessary, and then they submit that to whoever is above them. So every time we got a new person, it was like a new set of rules. So it really drug out for a long time, and that was probably the most stressful part. But obviously, when I well, not obviously, if you guys don't know, before you send in your application, you have to have a building or a location lockdown because you have to submit an address. So in your training, you go over some things about how to find a building. And I remember there was a video where you talk about negotiating. And I had a little bit of negotiation experience from our barbershop. And when you're talking about negotiating, you told them you were talking about trying to get free months. I can't remember how many months you said to like shoot for like three free months or something. So in our area, I couldn't find a good building with enough parking. There was always something about the building that wouldn't work. There wasn't enough parking for students and clients, or just so finding a building was really difficult. And then I would go online and I'd search all the commercial buildings in the area, and there wouldn't be that many. But then I'd be out driving around and I see all these empty buildings. So then I contacted one of my clients who owns a like a house flipping company, and I'm like, hey dude, how do I find who the owners of these people are? And he's like, hey, go to this website and you can pay money and you can find out all their personal information. And I'm like, all right, cool. So now I'm like doing spy work, and I'm like finding out all these people. You pay like 30 cents and you get like all their emails, all their phone numbers, like their parents, everything is really freaky. But I started finding out who owns these buildings, and I started reaching out directly to the owners. A lot of them got really mad at me and like sent me to their lawyers and stuff, but I wasn't going to give up. I was like, I'm finding a building. The building we're in now, I was driving around at this point, and that was like the way I was going to find a building. I'm just going to find an empty building, and I'm going to figure out who has it, and I'm going to make them rent it to me. So I found the building we're in now, and it used to be a Social Security building, and it had been vacant for 11 months or 11 years, or 8 years, something like that, a long time. But they had no signs up. You couldn't tell from the street that it was empty because the parking lot always looked pretty full, and you couldn't really see inside the windows. So I didn't realize that this building was empty. There was actually a building right next to it that's about a quarter of the size that you could tell was empty because you could see through the windows. So I was looking at that building, and then I realized this building over here is way bigger and it's empty. And it was really difficult to get a hold of the manager or the landlord to this property, because all the numbers associated with it was sending me to the old, it's not, I can't remember what it's called. It's the commercial landlord. It's called something, property manager. It was sending me to the old property manager, who was like this Russian lady who would get really mad at me every time I called. And I'm like, hey, I need somebody though, like send me to someone. And she just quit. She just started ignoring me. And I can't remember, oh, randomly in one of the other buildings, they put up a sign with a phone number. And I was like, finally, like 2 weeks later. So I call him, and he tells me what he wants for rent. And so we're negotiating over the phone. And I'm thinking about like what Chin said. And I'm like, I'm going to be a tough negotiator. And so he knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for a long time. He works in South Florida, and he manages like hundreds of properties. So I'm like, all right, this guy's way more pro than me. But I'm trying to act really professional, like I've done this 100 times too. And he's telling me about how much he wants per square foot, how much it's going to cost, CAM, all these things. And then one mistake he made was he told me that it had been vacant for 11 years. And I knew right there, he'll do anything. He'll take anything to get someone in this building. So I undercut him on the rent. He wanted $5,000 a month. I told him I'd pay him $2,000. We met in the middle at 22. Well, not even close to the middle. So we pay a little over $2,000. And then I told him I want 6 months free. And I was like shooting for the moon, hoping to get like halfway there. And he said, yeah. And he was like, okay, 6 months free. And I was just like, oh my gosh, he's really doing this. So I got 6 months free. I got the rent. So signed a 5-year lease. I got the rent super cheap. And then he wouldn't go that cheap for all 5 years. And I told him, I'm like, hey, but this is a long-term opportunity for you, because I'm building an educational facility here. I want my school to be in one location. I said, so I need cheap rent for 5 years so that I can build my business, so that I can stay for 5 more after that, and 5 more after that. He's like, well, okay, how about we do $8 a square foot or something like that, which ended up being like another $700 a month. And I was like, all right, bet, let's go. And then, so I ended up sealing this really good lease opportunity. Our building is 4,000 square feet. We have a really large clinic floor in the front. We have a classroom in the back. We have a break room. We have a second classroom if we need it that we're just kind of using for a lab right now. We make all our own products for our barber shop. We have, which is another great way to earn extra income in your shops, is you can have your own product line. So we have our own product line that we make that's all natural. And then we utilize the space over here we move the lab from the barbershop to here since we had extra space. Now we opened up more chairs or another studio in the barbershop. But so I was able to nail down that lease, which I'm really happy I got the 6 months, because when everything was going really badly with the state, having that extra free time saved me. I mean, that 2,200 times 6 saved me thousands of dollars. So yeah, the negotiation went well. And then after, let's see, so then everything with the state was just a mess. And then we finally got the email from our 4th or 5th caseworker with the state that everything was good to go and we could go down to the meeting, the in-person meeting at the Florida Department with the Florida Department of Education. And I was really nervous for it because I really didn't know what to expect at the meeting. I just knew that it was in person. And then for those of you who haven't gone, in Florida, I don't know if it's like this in any other state. So it's actually kind of like shady, but I kind of feel why they do it. But you pay, I can't remember what the fee to go to the meeting, when it was like $1,500 we had to pay to go to this meeting to stand in front of the Florida Department of Education. And I'm thinking this whole time that we're going to like a government building, not even close. We go down to Orlando and we're on a freaking golf resort, and it's like 5-star golf resort. All the people who work for the Florida Department of Education are staying there. And I'm like, yeah, this is why it's $1,500. And it's like super luxury. And I was like, oh, I get it, whatever. And so we go in there and they have like the big ballroom. They have the big ballroom set up, and there's all these different people that are trying to get licensed for different schools. People I was talking to, there was a guy there opening up a nursing facility or like a nursing school. Then there was a guy there opening up like to get your pilot's license, like a flight school, and then cosmetology schools. And then there was like one other barber school owner that I met who had already been licensed, but he was doing his like 1-year checkup thing. And but I remember sitting there and there's like probably 150 people like in the chairs, and it's kind of like set up like court. So you, in front of all these people, there's a podium and there's a microphone. And I'm like, oh man, we got to go up there in front of all these people. And not only are there all these people, there's like 10 Florida Department of Education like board members, and they're sitting in like a U shape, and then they have all their minions around them with like their computers. And I'm like, oh man, this is really intense. And then they're like, if you guys don't mind, just so you know, this will be recorded and aired live. So I'm like, okay, now we're on TV. All right, sweet. So then they have all these cameras pointing at everything. And I'm like low key panicking inside because my wife is super angry at me still. And um, if if we fail this like interaction, it's going to cost me like 10 grand. It's going to cost me a few months of rent. Like I got to come back down here, pay 1,500, miss work, come back to Orlando for like 3 days. So I'm like 10 grand. This is a minimum of 10 grand. My wife will kill me. Like I can't mess this up. So they're calling people up, and I'm super nervous. And I'm usually really calm in these situations. And for some reason, my wife this time, she's like, it's okay. It's no big deal. You got this. And I'm like, until I don't got it. And then you kill me. And so I'm like internally panicking more about like what's going to happen to me if I don't make this work. And they're the first 2 people they call up, they're grilling hard. with like really difficult questions about how they're going to onboard people. And when you guys are opening a school, there's so much information at first. And like when you're working with the state, you're going through all these things and there's so much, it's really hard to remember everything off the top of your head. But so when I'm up there and these people are getting put on the spot and they're like trying to flip through all their papers and like find these answers, and they're like, and then they have teams with them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have a team. They're like, oh, this is my marketing person, ask her. And they got like their marketing person, and then the VP, and then the president, and then like the person in charge of admin. I'm like, man, they got a 6-person team to answer all these questions. I have me, and then my wife knows a little bit, and a big book of papers. And so they totally grill like the first 2 people. And then the third person they call up and they're like, everything on your application looks great, approved. And I'm like, start praying. I'm like, God, please let that be us. Let that be us. And they call us up after they grill a few more people. And this was right after like the Will Smith, Chris Rock incident, when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. And the president of the Florida Department of Education, he made some comment about me being a barber, and he's bald, and he makes a comment about me being a barber, and he's like, as you can tell, I don't really need a barber. And then we do men's hair replacement in the barber shop. And I'm like, well, I can fix that for you. And that's the very first thing I say to him. And immediately I'm like, oh my God, why did I just say that to him? And then, so he starts laughing, thankfully, and everyone in the crowd starts laughing. So now there's like 300 people laughing at this guy because I made a bald joke to him, and I'm like eternally panicking. And then the vice president's like, how about you hold the insults until after you get approved? And I'm like, I agree. I totally agree. I shouldn't insult him. And then he's like, didn't you learn anything from the real Will Smith, Chris Rock incident? You don't make fun of bald people. And I'm like, touche. I guess I didn't learn. But then they actually didn't ask us a single question about our application. They were genuinely just curious in the setup of our school, which they didn't ask anyone else. Everything on our application looked good. So they just asked us how we had our school set up, and they were like really happy that we were opening a barber school because in their opinion, there's not enough. So they were pretty stoked we were doing that. So they approved us. I wanted to like scream right there, but I calmly walked back to the chair, waited till they let everyone out for lunch, went in the parking lot and celebrated. But yeah, so it was a pretty cool experience. Just don't grill them as soon as you get up to the podium. It's not a good idea. And
Now, take us through, you did a lot of work in that school.
yeah. So so we learned a lot when we opened our barbershop. Like, I'm pretty handy. I like to do things by myself. I like woodworking and things like that as a hobby when I have time. And fortunately, one of the benefits of having that building empty for so long is me and my wife were able to do most of the work on our own. So that was the worst part right there, ripping that carpet up. There was like a 1/2-inch layer of glue, and it probably took me 80 hours of grinding glue out of this whole building. It was like a month of misery. And then it was like, I'd walk out and I'd just be covered in glue. I was wearing like a hazmat suit doing it, but this is Florida. So like sweating, and I can't have the air conditioner on because it's sucking all the dust into the air conditioning system. So whenever I'd turn on the air conditioner, it would blow dust everywhere. So I was having to do it in this building that was like 90 degrees. It was terrible. But we did most of the work. The only people I hired a plumber to, right there on the bottom left corner of that picture, we have some shampoo bowls. Yep, right there. We got some shampoo bowls installed. I hired a plumber for that. And then I hired an electrician to put power in one of the back rooms for a washer and dryer, who was one of my clients. So he gave us a really good deal, which is a perk of being in the industry. And then he added like some outlets for us. But other than that, we did all the work on our own. And there's way more work that you can now than what's on our Instagram. But yeah, I was putting a stereo in, so we had speakers in the roof. I threw up So it was pretty tough because I was a new dad. We just bought a new house, so we're doing a bunch of housework. We had our barber shop, and then every weekend I was over here working on the school. So I was working like 6 or 7 days a week, and then my wife kind of forced me to stop working Sundays. So then I was only working 6 days for a long time, but now thankfully I have a weekend back. But yeah, so yeah, fortunately we were able to do most of this work on our own. YouTube is really good. We learned a lot of stuff on YouTube.
Tell us about the floors.
So the floors, after I grinded so we were limited on funds, especially because going through the state, that's expensive. Paying the bills at the building is expensive. Everything is expensive. So we had a pretty tight budget on what we could spend on building the business out. And this is a really large school. It's got a lot of square footage. So after grinding the glue down, we priced it out what it would cost to do epoxy. One guy gave me a quote at like $8,000. That was all I needed to hear. Wasn't paying $8,000 for floors. Hardwood was going to be really expensive too, or like LVP would be really expensive too. So instead, I just went to Home Depot and I did some research on YouTube, and I bought a cement primer. I primed the floor, and I bought some garage paint that is like half epoxy, half paint, and I did three layers of paint on the floor. So it's just cement, garage paint. So yeah, that video right there, the black and white one, that's the color of the inside of our school. But there's this one. This is what I had to do for like 80 hours. It was terrible. And it's very slow. So it was the most tedious thing I've ever done. And that's the family. So the shorter guy with the glasses, that's Jeremy. He's one of our barbers. My wife is standing next to him. The dude in the white shirt, he's one of our barbers, Ryan. The little dude in the middle, that's our mascot, Cruz. And then my wife's sister and my brother-in-law, Mike. And luckily, he was in the Air Force for 20 years, and he knows like a bunch about electrical and stuff like that. So he helped me do a lot of the electrical work around here, like putting up ceiling fans and doing all that. So if you guys have family and friends who know how to do things like that, I recommend utilizing them if you have a good relationship. And I offered to pay them, they wouldn't take it. So instead I pay them and like pay for their dinners and things like that when I have the opportunity to pay them back. But yeah, that's a little closer to what it looks like on the inside now. And that was the last day where it was like officially finished. I was doing the last cleanup. So, yep, now we're open. We've been open for 6 weeks now.
Let me know if anything particular you want me to click on.
Oh, nothing. Most of these are just reels and stuff. People, if you guys are doing social media, I definitely recommend just mainly focusing on reels. That's what we've gotten. I'm sure you guys know that, but that's what we've gotten our best responses. This was actually today. Today we I launched a Cosmo crossover workshop because I needed to make money. So I built a funnel, a sales funnel, and I started marketing through social media to get cosmetologists in here to cross over to barbers. So I made it a 3-day program. Really, I could take their hours and I could just sign off on their hours and charge them like a flat fee. But I wanted to provide them with value and also be able to extract as much money to fund my business as possible. So no one's going to pay $2,000 just for me to sign a paper when they can go 2 hours away and have a school do it for much cheaper. So we created a crossover workshop, 3-day program, hands-on, where we teach them about barbering. And then we charged them $2,000 for the 3 days. So with the first one we ran advertisements for about a month. If you guys, this is a really good idea for any of you guys who plan on opening a barber school, is to run a workshop like this. So most barber schools that I know of, they'll just kind of take cosmetologists in whenever they want to come in. Instead, we're going to do it quarterly and try to get groups, because it's, when you do it like a group, you can make it way more, you can really plan around what they need. So we built a 3-day course and only focused on them for 3 days, while another instructor worked with our barber students, so that we were able to make $8,000. So my mom is in the back, so I didn't charge her. She's the blonde, the white lady, which she's actually my biological mother. No one believes me. But so we made $8,000 in 3 days, which is a huge help for us. So we're going to start implementing that every quarter now. We're going to have that Cosmo crossover program.
So when you got open, how did you feel becoming a school owner?
Oh, like a boss, for sure. Like, really, how I just felt really accomplished, because the road to get there was so difficult. And there's a lot of times where I just felt like I regretted the decision to start when I started, especially when everything was going poorly with the state and it seemed like it was never ending. We were falling way behind schedule, because I was making the assumption that because I work so hard and I try to do things so well, that I would be the guy who got this done in 6 months. Like, the shortest possible time you can do it, I'm the guy who does that. I was totally wrong. And so it took a lot longer, and the road was really gnarly. But once we finally opened, I felt like a boss, because I realized my capabilities, and I kind of eliminated a lot of self destructive beliefs. And I think that a lot of people, including me, we kind of limit ourselves on our own more than anyone else does it, because we tell ourselves we can't do things or we're not good enough. But this really helped eliminate some of those self-defeating beliefs I had in myself. And then it really inspired me to, like, now that I got the school open, I can do so much more, because I don't think that there's many things that can be harder than what we went through to get the school open.
Now, how has it been with you get the students? How does it feel to have those students and you teaching them?
I love it. I really like it. I'm really torn between instructing and cutting hair, because I really like both. And that's another reason why we've been so successful with our barbershop, because we're both servant leaders. We really care about providing for anyone who is on our team or anyone we're helping the most valuable information and skills that we can. So whatever we know, we give them. We're always pouring into our teams. So, and we feel like that's our purpose. So when we open the school, we have these people with no experience, and we're able to really give them the best possible education that we can, which I honestly believe we're going to give people the best education they can get, definitely in this part of Florida, for sure.
What would you tell, we got a lot of people on here. There's only right now 1,153 NACCAS accredited schools. And there's not a lot of schools, period, in the whole United States. It's all over 1 million beauty professionals or whatever. So owning a school is kind of similar to going to the NBA or going to the NFL. Is not many of them. What would you tell that barber or that stylist or that nail tech or esthetician that's working in a shop or that owns a shop, but they got a dream of going to that next level?
I would tell them that first, I would want to make sure that you're prepared to work and do what's necessary. And if you're that person, it's totally worth it. If you have a passion for instructing, like you told me when I first talked to you, if you like teaching people, then you should do it. If you do not like teaching people, then maybe work with someone else that likes teaching people, because another thing is we're having a really hard time finding instructors, which I thought it would be easier to find instructors, but I was wrong again. Hiring is a tough one. But I think that if you guys are really interested in doing it and you have a passion for teaching, you should go for it. it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Let's see. Do you have time for any Q&A? Because we got some questions over here.
Oh yeah, I have plenty of time. I'm not limited on time at all.
All right, so we're gonna do some Q&A. Anything that you wanna, anything else you wanna share with them, Cameron? What'd you think about the ClickFunnels event when we got to meet?
The ClickFunnels event was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. It was the first time I ever went. I went last minute. Someone gave me, I'm a big fan of Ed Milet. I really like him. I listen to him all the time. I watch his YouTube videos. I listen to him speak all the time. And someone gave me one of Russell Brunson's books not that long ago. And I started reading it, and about like 20 pages in, I was like, this is what I need to do. Because I'm already like, I really enjoy the process of building businesses. So now that the school is open and running, I'm like, oh man, like I need to open another business. So I knew then that I needed to go down to ClickFunnels, and then I found out Ed Milet was going to be there, and I was like, yeah, I'm going for sure. And then the level of knowledge that I received from the speakers there was incredible. It's the best conference I've ever been to. And then I didn't even know you were going to be there, so that was really cool. Once I found out you were getting your 2 Comma Club award, I stuck around for the rewards just because you were going to be there. I didn't really care about watching. So once you went on stage and got your award, I dipped. But that, and then the networking I was able to do, I made some really good friends there. And then one of my friends now, his name is Francis. He's out of San Diego, California, and he owns a marketing agency. And the stuff he's been teaching me about technology is just, it's like mind blowing about what you're able to do. So just the relationships that I was able to make there were just as valuable or more valuable than the actual knowledge the speakers give you. So if you guys ever have the opportunity and you're in an area with a lot of people, even if they're not in your industry, really network with them, because they'll be able to give you guys tools that they apply that you may be able to apply in your business that no one else is doing, that's going to separate you guys.
All right. I thank you for that. So we're gonna do some Q&A.